6, duck stamp request, wildlife specialist Mark Farman and Mike Zarodka for possible action. The Commission will review and may take action to approve projects submitted for funding from duck stamp funds. Gentlemen.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Farman. I'm a staff specialist with the Habitat Division. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the proposals that have been submitted for funding during fiscal year 16 under the duck stamp program and the related budget status of that account. Hopefully you all have a copy of the duck stamp report that we sent you in your commission package. If you look at page 10 of that report, there's a table that summarizes the names, project managers, and funding requested of the 16 different projects that were submitted for funding for a total of $159,550. Staff recommends that that list of projects be approved today. In a few minutes, Mike's going to tell you about a couple of these because most of these are on the wildlife management areas that he manages that program. But before he does, I wanted to just call your attention to the current budget status of the account. If you turn to the next page, on page 11, you'll see that if the Commission approves the full list of projects as recommended, the account balance at the end of the next fiscal year, FY16, will be roughly $258,341. That's a preliminary estimate from our fiscal services section. And you can also see that there is about $70,000 less in proposals this year than last year, which helps protect the balance somewhat. The anticipated revenue coming into the account is roughly the same as FY15. It's about $98,000. So before I turn it over to Mike to talk about the WMA projects, are there any questions regarding the overall budget or process, anything along those lines?
Questions from the Commission? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Drew, Commissioners. For the record, Mike Zarodka. I'm the Wildlife Staff Specialist for the Department of Wildlife. I oversee the Wildlife Management Area System. Just a quick update on some work that we've completed at the wildlife areas during fiscal year 15 and how some of those tie into FY16 proposals that we have in front of you. The Carson Lake and Pasture Sprig Pond Improvement Project that was approved in fiscal year 15, that'll be completed sometime this summer. The project entails cleaning of a canal approximately 1 mile of the cabin drain that's found out there. We'll be replacing water control structures with more efficient models. This will improve the water delivery efficiency out there, and it'll be removing sediment buildup that's accumulated over time out there as well. So that's a project that we're partnering with Ducks Unlimited with. They're doing the survey and engineer work out there. The funding that was used on that project was not only the state duck stamp, but also NIFWIF contributed some money to that, as well as the state DU chapters. Another major project going on is wetland enhancement projects down at Key Pittman and the Overton wildlife areas. At Key Pittman, we're working at the north ponds up by the office and shop areas. Ponds at both of those wildlife areas were created years ago without a lot of engineering expertise. So they lack the amount of waterfowl habitat and hunting opportunity that they are capable of supporting. So we're at the upper pond at Key Pittman. We also have issues when we manage it at a higher level, it floods onto private landowners' hay pasture, so that causes problems. So over recent years, we've just been running it at a lower level to kind of deal with that problem now until we can get in there with some engineering and reconfigure that pond. The Ducks Unlimited engineers actually submitted their draft designs earlier this week to Alan and I. We haven't had a chance to look over them, but we're going to review them early next week, and then DU is coming over from Sacramento, and we'll sit down on Tuesday to look at those projects with them. Phase 1 for the wetland enhancement on those two projects was approved with FY15 duck stamp funds. Phase 2 of the project is a current proposal. This is asking for funding to to buy culvert, water control structures, and other infrastructure that will be needed in Phase 3, which will hopefully take place FY17, and that'll be the pond leveling and the actual dirt work associated with improving those areas. So that's all I had. Is there any questions?
Commission questions? Comments? You guys are quiet today. I have a few, and I guess the biggest one I'd like to start off with is just, I appreciate the report. I know there's a lot of work that goes into that. Just a couple of recommendations. I know on a couple of the projects we've funded in the past, some of them had a really good follow-up in terms of the monitoring and things that are going on. Some were a little more silent, so maybe just a sentence or two on what we're seeing. A couple of them were on the food plots, and I'll have a question for you on that.
Sure.
And the only other question I had is on some of the funding requests. We see what's coming out of this pot, but I know you guys are also leveraging that with a lot of match funds. And like in the Upland report, I think we have a match category. I know I like seeing that just to see how much that funding gets leveraged. So future reports, just a couple of small additions. But one of the questions I guess I had specifically was in terms of Kirch and Key Pittman, what we're seeing in terms of the food plots and use, both by the animals, and if that's doing anything on the sportsmen who are using that area as well.
Yeah, both areas have food plots specific to both either upland or waterfowl. I mean, I guess dealing with the duck stamp, there's about 40 acres by Key Pittman that's managed in. The goose hunting has been, I would say, stable, average the last few years. We haven't seen anything really change. We did put in an additional 40-acre winter wheat plot over in Kirch, and that was this is only the third year that we've had that in production, and of course, goose hunting out there has increased with that one. So.
Okay. The other question I had is just in terms of the Mason Valley projects on joggles and some of the pumping of things. Do we anticipate any issues with what's going on with the state engineer and some of the water stuff, or are we looking pretty good right now going into the late
Well,
summer?
the issue with water at Mason Valley, of course, is the irrigation with RID, the irrigation company. We receive less than 10% of our prime water deliveries this year, so that hurts. But as far as with what we use the joggles for, that helps transfer water from the fish hatchery, because the hatchery is pumping continuously, 365 days a year. So that is actually a pump that we use to pick up hatchery water and use that to push it further to the east to supplement some of those ponds. So
the only other thing on, just staying on the Mason Valley side is I know with all the programs and projects going on down there that most people probably don't realize that you've maybe more than doubled now the size of that management area and some of the stuff with Walker River Conservancy. And I was just curious if, those properties that are coming in are pretty good in terms of noxious weeds, or if you anticipate, going forward, we're going to need some more funding to deal with that. And if the Conservancy is kind of helping with some of those projects as the new property comes on board.
Absolutely, they are. NIFWIF, when they donated the 1,500 acres on the south end, they were required to help with weed control and actually restoration efforts to get desirable vegetation going on that property that they donated to us. The other addition was the 2,500 acres on the north end of Mason Valley, north of the railroad tracks. That was just a purchase. We bought that from a private party, so that doesn't have too bad of weed control or weed problems on it, but we've been doing control efforts on that property.
Any additional discussion or questions by the Commission? Commissioner Bliss?
Yeah, I'm just curious if you guys had any plans in the future to do any of these food plots in Temple Valley, the 3C Ranch.
There is on a smaller scale. You don't see funding requests because we do smaller, a couple acre plots that are scattered all over the property, and most of those are around. If you remember, in 2008 we finished up a restoration project with DU, and there's actually food plots, and I was associated with most of those. Around each of those ponds there is millet and sunflower food plots for upland hunting.
And you don't have to do much maintenance with them, or that's just a little bit of money that you to go in and replant the sunflowers.
It's part of the annual program out there. The guys, they'll seed it every year.
Commissioner Valentine.
Quick question, Mike, on Key Pittman on the north pond. Now that you've got the design from DU, how long will it take to implement that design in the field?
We hope to replace water control structures possibly in the next fiscal year, FY16, but dirt work will probably take place the year after, so sometime in the year after, next July.
Additional questions or discussion by the commission? All right, seeing none, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. I'll take it out. County Advisory Board input on agenda item number 6.
Craig Burnside, Douglas Cab. We unanimously voted to recommend approval of all these projects. However, we did note, as Mr. Furman pointed out, that the 3-year history that's listed on that budget summary, project costs are exceeding revenues by approximately $100,000 a year. That fund is dwindling. So at the rate we're going, in another 3 years, if that trend continues, funds available for projects will only be brought in from revenue. I have stood here and mentioned before that I think that the cost of running pumps and the cost of spraying weeds, those are operational costs. They're really not projects. So I would like to see those things be incorporated into the operations budget and freeing up that money to further be able to do projects in the future when you're going to run out of money. That last part was my personal comment, not anything voted on by our board. But we did unanimously vote to recommend approval of these projects.
Additional county advisory boards?
Paul Dixon, Clark County. I never really got clarity on what I'm going to say right now as to location, but there was a concern raised by several of the CAB members in Clark about people feeding ducks around the WMAs during duck season to draw them away from the WMAs and people hunting. And so my question was, is in law enforcement space, Tyler, what do we do with people who feed wild ducks during duck season? Is there anything against that, or Tony?
Paul, if we could, just because it's a little off topic, let's do that in CAB member items tomorrow.
Do that in CAB member items?
Yeah.
Okay, it was just...
And then we'll prime those guys up to address.
Prime them up and run, okay.
But,
perfectly fine. And then I wanted to thank you guys on where we're going with pond leveling and stuff in the North Pond Key Pittman. That was another concern, but that got answered, so thank you.
additional CAB items or input on item 6? Okay, public comment on agenda item 6. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Or Mike, or was there anything else you wanted to add after the comments? If there's not further discussion,
I do have.
Mr. Johnson.
I have a question. I'm trying to adjust my ears so I can hear the conversation. So I apologize. I was wondering if Mike or Mark do we know this $10,000 that's going to go to DU for wetland conservation in Canada? Do you know where? I mean, where in Canada this wetland conservation is going to occur?
Yeah. For the record, Mike Zaratka, Department of Wildlife. That $10,000 is an annual contribution that's been going on for well over 10 years, and I think Tony just got a plaque from DU last year stating that. I haven't seen the report for this year, but we do get an annual report from DU saying where that money or portions of it were used at. So we just know it's in the Canadian provinces somewhere where majority of the puddle ducks that pass through here, where they nest, so that spending the money up there benefits hunters down here as those birds migrate.
Yeah, and if I might add, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Zarog is correct. We were just recently recognized by Ducks Unlimited for over $100,000 of contributions that occurred over a decade, and it's 10,000, then 10,000 a year. But we were invited by Ducks Unlimited to come up to Canada this year and view, sorry I didn't tell you guys about that, and view some of the habitat work that had been partly funded by our contribution, but given the cost associated with traveling up there, I didn't see that being a real prudent expenditure of sportsman's revenues, and we have a very good and long-standing relationship with Ducks Unlimited. We have a lot of confidence in their abilities. We work with them quite a bit here in this state, but because we're not the duck factory, a waterfowl production area. We see that money being better spent up in those reaches, and it pays dividends by migrating waterfowl down here later.
I just wanted to add real briefly, Mark Farman, it's my understanding that the majority of their habitat work is done in Alberta and Saskatchewan, which they call the prairie provinces, or the pothole country, if you will, where there's a lot of wetlands. There's been studies that show a lot of the waterfowl that make their way down through the Pacific Flyway through Nevada come from that area. So that's one of the reasons we've been donating money each year.
Additional questions or discussion? I guess just in regards, my only finishing comment on 6 would be that given the current state of affairs with our weather and lack of winter, that I would encourage people to do maybe a rain and or snow dance. And also, even if you're not planning on going waterfowl hunting, if you like what you see in the report on what the money's being spent on, buy a duck stamp anyhow. So, with those 2 shameless plugs, any further discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion. Commissioner McNerney.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve fiscal year 2016 duck stamp projects and expenditures as proposed, recommended by the department.
I'll second it.
Okay. I've got a motion and a second to approve the duck stamp request as presented by the department. Is there any discussion or question on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously with Lane and Young absent. We'll close agenda item 6.